The desert holds many secrets, but none run deeper than those buried in Tahan Lone-Wolf's heart. 20 years of solitude on his remote Arizona ranch had hardened him like the sun-baked earth beneath his boots. Each morning he'd rise with the dawn, tend to his small herd, and speak to no one but the wind. The locals knew to keep their distance. Some said he was the last of his band. Others whispered of betrayals that had turned his spirit as hard as the mountains framing his land. But no man can outrun his past forever. When a dust-covered pickup carrying 10 displaced Apaches rolls down his driveway seeking shelter, the walls Tahan built begin to crack. Could these strangers be the family he never thought he'd have again? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn came to Tahan's ranch, as it always did, with an explosion of orange light that set the mesas ablaze. He sat on his porch, weathered hands wrapped around a tin coffee mug, watching as his 200 acres gradually took shape in the growing light. A modest adobe house, a barn that leaned slightly to the north, and 30 head of cattle scattered across the hardscrabble landscape. Not much to show for a lifetime, but it was his and his alone at 65. Tahan moved with deliberate economy, each motion honed by decades of solitary routine. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug in the basin, and stepped into the yard. The cattle needed checking, especially after last night's coyote howls had sounded unusually close. His boots left a familiar trail in the dust as he walked the perimeter fence. 20 years ago, he'd purchased this remote patch of Arizona desert, as far from the reservation and its painful memories as he could get while still remaining on what he considered Apache land. Back then, his hair had been black instead of steel gray, his shoulders straight instead of slightly stooped. Inside his house, there were few concessions to comfort. A bed, a table, 3 chairs nobody used, shelves of practical supplies. The only personal touch was a locked cedar chest in the corner of his bedroom, something he looked at daily, but rarely opened. By midday, the June heat had become a physical weight. Tahan loaded his aging pickup with empty feed sacks and a list of supplies. Town was a necessary evil, but one he limited to every other week. Red Rock sat 45 minutes away, a place of just over 1,000 souls that served the scattered ranches and farms of the region. Tahan parked in his usual spot behind the general store, avoiding Main Street and its prying eyes. "Morning, Tahan," called Ben, the storekeeper. "Heard there's some trouble over at the reservation. Mining company making moves again." Tahan nodded once, neither inviting nor discouraging further conversation. He methodically collected his supplies: feed, coffee, flour, ammunition. "Your usual plus the nails you called about," Ben said, ringing up the purchases. "Any word from those folks headed your way?" Tahan looked up sharply. "What folks?" "Maybe nothing. Just heard some families got displaced." "Someone mentioned your name." Ben shrugged apologetically. "Probably nothing." Tahan paid and loaded his truck quickly. As he drove home, his eyes caught unusual tire tracks on the distant Highway 2. Many vehicles moving too fast for this remote stretch. Evening brought the ritual he both dreaded and needed. In his bedroom, Tahan unlocked the cedar chest and looked inside without touching the contents. An eagle feather, a medicine bundle wrapped in red cloth, a carved wooden flute, photographs he couldn't quite bring himself to examine. Reminders of a life abandoned, an identity set aside. He closed the lid without removing anything. On the porch at sunset, Tahan scanned the horizon with binoculars, a habit formed from years of protecting his solitude. Far in the distance, he caught the dust cloud of an approaching vehicle, still, miles away but definitely turning onto the rarely used ranch road. He set the binoculars down and waited, watching the cloud grow larger. For 20 years, No one had come down that road without invitation. 20 years of carefully constructed peace was about to be disturbed, and something in Tahan's chest, a feeling long dormant, flickered uncomfortably to life. Tahan stepped inside long enough to retrieve his shotgun. Not loaded, he wasn't that kind of man, but visible enough to make his position clear. The dust cloud grew larger, revealing a battered pickup truck laboring up the incline toward his house. He counted 10 passengers as the vehicle lurched to a stop. 10 Apache faces looking back at him through the windshield and windows. There. Expressions a mixture of exhaustion and wariness that mirrored his own. A woman around 60 emerged from the passenger side. She stood straight despite obvious fatigue, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a traditional bun. "Tahan Lone-Wolf," she said. Not a question. He didn't answer, just rested the shotgun against his shoulder. "I'm Elena Whiteriver. You remember my voice, even if you pretend not to remember my face." The name hit him like a physical blow. Elena had been on the tribal council when he left. She had tried to stop him. "We need one night's shelter," she continued. Just until morning. Behind her, others were cautiously exiting the truck. An older man who must be her brother Marcus. A younger woman with 2 children clinging to her legs. A couple with an infant. An ancient woman who could only be a medicine woman. And a middle-aged man whose military-bearing Tahan recognized immediately. "There's nothing for you here," Tahan said, his voice rough from disuse. The older woman Elena took a step forward. "There used to be. Do you remember when you spoke? For our people at the Water Rights Conference? When you led the protest against the first mining survey? That was another life." Tahan shifted uncomfortably. "Horizon Mining has expanded again," Elena explained. "Our homes were bulldozed yesterday. 10 families displaced. We're traveling to relatives in Flagstaff, but we can't make it in one day with the children." The little girl, perhaps 10 years old, stepped forward. "Are you a real Apache warrior?" "My grandma says you used to be." Lily, her mother warned softly. Taha looked at the child, then at the group. Their possessions were packed haphazardly in the truck bed, all that remained of their lives. "The barn," he said finally. "For one night, be gone at first light." Relief washed over their faces. The man Tahan had pegged as military nodded respectfully as they began unloading essentials. "Thomas was a sergeant," Elena said, following Tahan's gaze. 2 tours in Afghanistan." Thomas and Tahan exchanged the briefest of nods, the silent recognition. Of men who had seen combat. As they settled in the barn, Helena approached Tahan again. "You were right, you know. About the mining company. About what would happen if we didn't stand together." "Save it," Tahan said. "One night doesn't make us kin again." Later, as they prepared a simple meal over a fire pit near the barn, Tahan watched from his porch. The familiar cadence of Apache voices carried on the evening air. The children's laughter. The ritual blessing of food he hadn't performed in decades. When darkness fell, thunder rumbled in the distance. Tahan checked the old barometer by his door. The needle had dropped significantly. Rain was coming, the first real storm of the season. He stood at his window, watching the family settle in the barn. Despite himself, his eyes lingered on Elena. They had been young together once, part of the same community. There had been a time when he wouldn't have hesitated to help her. Thunder crashed again, closer now. The desert would soon be awash with rain. The dry washes transformed into raging torrents within minutes. Tahan turned away from the window, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling taking root in his chest. One night, he told himself. One night couldn't undo 20 years of chosen solitude. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of imminent rain and the faint sound of an Apache lullaby as one of the women sang a child to sleep. Tahan woke before dawn, as was his habit. He stepped onto his porch, expecting solitude, but found Elder Nara already awake. burning cedar and sage in a small clay bowl outside the barn. "The old ways still speak to you," she observed without looking up. "You rise with the morning star, as our ancestors taught." Tahan frowned. "I rise early to work my land." "The land works through you," she replied, her ancient fingers nimble as she added more herbs to the smoldering mixture. "Even when you turn your back on tradition." He stepped away, uncomfortable with her perceptions, and switched on his weather radio. The crackling voice confirmed what the heavy air promised. Severe thunderstorms expected throughout the region. Flash flood warnings in effect. By the time the sun crested the mesa, the family had emerged from the barn. The children, Lily and her younger brother James, explored the ranch yard with uninhibited curiosity, while the adults maintained a respectful distance from Tahan's house. "Your tractor's timing belt is slipping," said Daniel, the younger man, gesturing toward the equipment shed. "I could take a look if you'd like. I'm a mechanic." Tahan had been struggling with the tractor for weeks. "Tools are in the shed," he said after a moment's hesitation. The younger woman, Sarah, Elena's daughter, approached as Tahan was checking fence posts. She carried a small medical kit. "Your hand," she said, pointing to where barbed wire had gouged his palm days earlier. "It's infected." "It's fine," he replied, but she was already examining the wound. "I'm a nurse," she explained, cleaning the injury with practiced efficiency. "This needs attention." Her touch was clinical but gentle. Tahan couldn't remember the last time another person had touched him with healing intent. Later, as rain began to patter against the tin roof, Elena joined Tahan on his covered porch. "The tribal council asked about you last month," she said. "They remember your advocacy before." She paused, carefully avoiding direct mention of why he'd left. "Don't," Tahan warned. "We've kept fighting," she continued anyway. "For 20 years, while you've been here. Alone." The radio crackled with an updated weather alert. Flash flood warning now in effect through tomorrow. All low water crossings impassable. Residents advised to shelter in place. Marcus, examining the property maps Tahan had reluctantly shared, looked up. "The main road to town crosses 3 washes. We won't be leaving tomorrow." Tahan stared at the steadily increasing rainfall. 2 days then, when the water recedes. That evening, as the storm intensified, Sarah's children performed traditional songs in the barn. The pure, high voices carried to where Tahan sat alone, in his house, bringing unwelcome memories of community gatherings, long abandoned. He retreated to his bedroom and finally opened the cedar chest fully. Among the sacred items lay a faded photograph. Tahan, 20 years younger, standing proudly with tribal council members. Elena was there, and Marcus too, their faces unlined by the years of struggle that followed. Tahan quickly replaced the photo. As thunder crashed directly overhead, the lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The storm was worsening. A sharp knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Elena stood there, rain-drenched despite the short distance from barn to house. "The barn roof is leaking badly," she said. "The children and elder Nara." "Bring them in," Tahan interrupted, surprising himself as much as her. "The others can stay in the barn if they secure the leaks." Elena's eyes held his for a long moment. "Thank you, Tahan." As the night deepened, the storm's fury increased. Rain hammered against the windows like thrown gravel, and wind howled through the desert scrub. Inside Tane's house, Elder Nara and the children slept on blankets in the main room, while Sarah kept watch over them. Tahan sat at his kitchen table, listening to the sounds of people breathing in his space for the first time in 2 decades. The walls that had sheltered only his solitude now protected others. The sensation was foreign, uncomfortable, and yet something long buried stirred within him as the waters rose outside. Midnight brought no peace. A thunderclap like a cannon shot jolted everyone awake. Rain fell in blinding sheets, illuminated by near-constant lightning that turned night to stuttering day. "The wash!" Marcus shouted from the doorway, rainwater streaming from his clothes. "It's rising fast." Tahan grabbed his coat. Vehicles need to be moved to higher ground. Outside, the world had transformed. Water flowed across the yard in rivulets that joined to form streams. Marcus and Tahan waded through ankle-deep water to the pickup truck. "Thomas is moving your truck," Marcus shouted over the storm. "Where should we take this one?" "The rise behind the barn," Tahan pointed. "Follow me." Inside the house, Elena organized. "The family. Sarah, keep the children away from the windows. Daniel, Ava, get everything elevated in the barn." The ancient radio on Tahan's counter crackled with emergency alerts. Catastrophic flash flooding throughout Navajo and Apache counties. All roads impassable. Emergency services suspended until conditions improve. When Marcus and Tahan returned, soaked to the skin, they found Elder Nara performing a ceremony with cedar and sage. Tahan's initial reaction was to object to such practices in his home, but the calming effect on the frightened children was immediate. "Let's." "An old blessing for protection from storms," he said, surprising himself by speaking. Elder Nara smiled slightly. "You remember." The youngest child, James, began to cry softly as another thunderclap shook the house. Tahan stood awkwardly, then reluctantly sat beside the boy. "Apache warriors aren't afraid of thunder," he said gruffly. "It's just the sky spirits bowling." The old explanation, one he'd heard as a child, slipped out unbidden. James looked up with teary eyes, but growing interest. "Bowling? That's what my grandfather told me," Tahan continued, feeling the weight of eyes on him. "The crash is when they knock all the pins down." The boy's fear visibly receded. "Do they win prizes?" "Only if they listen to their elders," Tahan replied. Catching Elena's surprised expression out near dawn, Sarah's youngest developed a fever. "He needs medicine," she said, concern etching her face. Tahan hesitated, then went to his bedroom. From the cedar chest, he retrieved a small leather pouch. "Willow bark and elderberry," he explained, returning. "For fever." Sarah examined the traditional medicine. "You still make this?" "I made it before." He didn't elaborate that before meant 20 years ago, that the pouch had sat unused, but preserved all this time. As morning light struggled through the clouds, the rain finally slackened. Tahan and Marcus ventured out to assess the damage. From the highest point on the property, they saw what the night's fury had wrought. The main road was gone, simply gone, replaced by a churning river of mud and debris. Telephone lines dangled uselessly from broken poles. The desert had been transformed overnight into an impassable waterscape. 2 weeks, Marcus estimated, surveying the destruction. At least that before anything dries enough to be passable. Tahan stood silent, the implications washing over him like the floodwaters. 2 weeks with 10 strangers in his carefully maintained solitude. 2 weeks of memories and connections he'd spent decades trying to forget. "We'll find another way," Marcus offered, reading his expression. "Perhaps someone can come for us once the emergency services are running." Tahan shook his head slowly. "There is no other way. Not until the water recedes." He walked away, needing solitude to process this unwelcome development. Finding a sheltered spot beneath an overhang, he stared out at his transformed land. 20 years of carefully constructed isolation threatened by floodwaters, and the family they'd stranded on his property. 20 years of avoiding the very people now dependent on his hospitality. The irony wasn't lost on him. Water, which Apache people had always considered sacred, had just washed away the boundaries he'd built to keep his own people at a distance. Morning brought uncomfortable clarity. Tahan called everyone to the kitchen table, the first formal gathering in his home in decades. 2 weeks minimum before the roads are passable, he announced without preamble. You'll need to understand my rules. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances, but nodded respectfully. The east pasture is for the cattle. Stay clear. The workshop behind the house is off limits. Water is precious, use it sparingly. Tahan paused, struggling with the unfamiliar role of host. The rest we'll figure out day by day. We'll contribute, Elena said. We have skills, and we won't be a burden. Tell us about horizon mining, Tahan said abruptly. What happened? Elena withdrew a folder from her bag and spread several documents across the table. They've been planning this expansion for years. These are the promises they made to the tribal council. Tahan examined the paper's community development pledges, employment guarantees, environmental protections. Pretty words. Pretty lies, Marcus corrected. Once they secured approval, everything changed. The employment went to outside contractors. The environmental protections became guidelines. Sarah spread out more documents, legal notices, eviction orders. They claimed our homes were on land they purchased legally. We had 48 hours to evacuate. The tribal council fought it, Elena added. But the company had connections with county officials. Documents disappeared. Surveys were altered. Tahan's jaw tightened. And our people just accepted this? Our people, Elena repeated, emphasizing the connection Tahan had denied. Most had nowhere to go. The company offered relocation assistance, barely enough for a month's rent somewhere else. Tahan stood and walked to the window. I've been unaware of these struggles. By choice, Elena replied softly. The words hung in the air between. Them, uncomfortable but undeniable. Daniel broke the silence. We need to assess supplies, plan for an extended stay. I'll inventory what we have, Thomas offered. We can hunt, Marcus added. Gather what's available on the land. Tahan nodded. Agreement. The practical concerns provided welcome distraction from deeper issues. Later, as Marcus and Daniel explored the property, they discovered Tahan's workshop. Despite his prohibition, the door stood ajar. Inside, they found woodworking tools and several half-finished projects, a cradle board, ceremonial rattles, a traditional bawl abandoned mid-creation decades ago. He was a craftsman, Daniel observed, running his fingers over the precise woodwork. One of our best, Marcus confirmed. Before he left. Outside, Thomas worked silently alongside Tahan, repairing storm damage to the barn roof. Neither man spoke. Much, but a rhythm developed between them, a mutual understanding of men accustomed to physical labor and personal discipline. As evening approached, young Lily followed Tahan as he checked the fences. Why do you live all alone? She asked with a child's directness. Taha. That's a grown-up question. Grandma Elena says it's because you're sad inside. Before Tahan could respond, Elena called the child away. Lily, come help with dinner. I'm sorry, she said. To Tahan. Children speak without filters. No harm done, he replied, though the child's observation had struck closer than he'd admit. As the sun set, Tahan stood at the edge of his property, watching the distant horizon. The floodwaters still stretched across the lowlands, reflecting the fiery sky. In the distance, dust clouds rose, vehicles moving along the far highway. Thomas joined him, binoculars in hand. 3 vehicles heading this way, he reported, taking the high-access road. Tahan took the binoculars and focused. 2 black SUVs and a sheriff's vehicle, still distant, but definitely approaching the only passable route to his property. Horizon mining, Thomas said grimly. Their security vehicles have that same profile. Tahan handed back the binoculars. Get everyone inside the house. No one shows themselves until I say so. His tone had changed, harder, more commanding. The voice of a man who once led others, now reluctantly stepping back into that role. Tahan stood at his property gate, shotgun visible but pointed downward. The approaching vehicle slowed, then stopped on the access road. Two men emerged from the first SUV, one in a security uniform, the other in business casual attire. From the sheriff's vehicle, a young deputy stepped out cautiously. "This is private property," Tahan called before they reached the gate. The uniformed man stepped forward. "Mike Lawson, head of security for Horizon Mining. We're looking for trespassers who may have come this way." "No trespassers here," Tahan replied evenly. The deputy cleared his throat. "Mr. Lone-Wolf, we have reports that individuals from the relocated area might be sheltering here. I'm Deputy Reynolds. You have a warrant, Deputy Reynolds?" Tahan asked. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we're just doing a welfare check." "And warrant," Tahan repeated. "Or tribal council authorization to enter Apache homestead land." Lawson stepped closer, his posture subtly threatening. "Look, old man, we know they came this way. The mining company has legal right to ensure that the relocation order is followed." "Not on my land, they don't," Tahan countered. "This property's boundaries were established in the 1892 Territorial Agreement and confirmed in the Apache Land Claims Settlement of 1972. The business-suited man joined the conversation. "We're simply trying to assist these people in accessing their relocation benefits. It's for their own good." "Their own good is not your concern on my property," Tahan said. Lawson's friendly facade slipped. "We'll be back in 3 days with proper documentation. Maybe county assessors should review your property lines while we're at it. I hear there are often discrepancies in these old ranch boundaries." 3 days, Tahan agreed. "Bring whatever paperwork you want. Until then, this gate stays closed." The men retreated to their vehicles, Lawson casting a final measuring look at the property. When Tahan returned to the house, the family had witnessed the exchange from windows and doorways. "You didn't tell them we were here," Marcus said, a note of surprise in his voice. "My land, my business, who's on it?" Tahan replied gruffly. Elena stepped forward. "They'll be back with paperwork." "Let them come," Tahan said. "I've defended this boundary for 20 years. That evening, Thomas found Tahan cleaning his shotgun on the porch. He sat nearby without speaking, the silence comfortable between them. "Marines?" Tahan finally asked. Thomas nodded. 2 tours. "You were Army, Vietnam?" 2 tours, Tahan confirmed. "Long time ago." "Some things you don't forget," Thomas observed. The simple acknowledgement opened a narrow channel between them. Both men had seen combat, had carried those experiences home like invisible wounds. "Your security assessment was good today," Thomas said. "You positioned yourself with clear sight lines, controlled the engagement." "Old habits," Tahan replied. "Good habits," Thomas corrected. "They'll need those skills in the coming days." Later, when the house had quieted, Tahan retrieved a metal box from beneath a floorboard in his bedroom. Inside lay his military service medal, legal documents pertaining to the ranch, and detailed boundary surveys. He had prepared for challenges to his land over the years, anticipating that someday someone would come for what was his. What he hadn't anticipated was defending it not just for himself, but for others as well. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Elena stood in the doorway. "I remember when you were given that," she said, nodding toward the medal. "The tribal council held a ceremony for you when you returned." "Different life," Tahan said, closing the box. "You stood against outsiders then, too," Elena persisted. "You were our strongest voice. And what did it get us?" Tahan asked bitterly. "It got us time," Elena answered. 20 years before they came back. 20 years some of us used better than others." The implication hung in the air between them. Tahan had used those years to hide. The community had used them to fight. 3 days, Tahan said, changing the subject. We need to be ready when they return. Elena nodded, accepting the deflection. We will be. Some of us never stopped being ready. Dawn brought clearer skies and a decision from Tahan. We need to hunt, he announced at breakfast. Supplies. Won't last with 12 people. I'll go with you, Thomas offered immediately. Me too, added Daniel. I know tracking. Tahan retrieved an old bow from his workshop hand-carved decades earlier. We hunt the old way, he said. Quieter. Conserves ammunition. In the storage shed, he found 2 more bows. These need new strings, he said, examining them. But they'll work. Elena watched from the doorway as Tahan demonstrated proper technique. To the younger men, "You still remember," she observed. "Some things stay in the muscle," he replied, pulling the bowstring with practiced ease, despite his age dot, as the men prepared to leave. Elena and Sarah began expanding Tahan's small garden. "These rows can be doubled," Sarah said, measuring the space. "We have seeds from our own gardens." Elder Nara walked the property's edge, stopping occasionally to gather plants. "White sage here," she noted. "Desert willow, creosote. Good medicine, all of it." Young Lily and James followed her, learning names and uses for each plant. "Mr. Tahan doesn't know these are medicines?" Lily asked, surprised. "He knew once," Nara answered. "Sometimes we forget what we need most." In the forest beyond the pasture, Tahan led Thomas and Daniel silently. Though he hadn't tracked game in years, the knowledge returned reading broken twigs, fresh droppings, faint impressions in soft earth. "Mule deer," he whispered, pointing to a partial hoofprint. 3, maybe 4. They followed the signs to a small clearing where 2 deer grazed cautiously. Tahan nodded to Thomas, who knocked an arrow with military precision. The shot was clean. The deer dropped instantly. "Your grandfather taught you well," Tahan said approvingly. Thomas looked surprised. "How did you know my grandfather taught me?" "He taught everyone," Tahan replied. "Ben Blackhorse was the best hunter in 3 counties. You knew him," Daniel realized. "A long time ago," Tahan acknowledged, then changed the subject. "We need to dress this deer properly. The old way." As Tahan demonstrated the traditional Apache method of preparing the deer, his hands moved with remembered grace. He spoke softly, explaining each step and its significance. "Nothing is wasted," he emphasized. "The hide, the sinew, the organs all have purpose." When they returned to the ranch, their successful hunt was met with appreciation. Tahan found himself instructing Daniel and Sarah's children in preparing the meat. Words and phrases in Apache, unused for decades, slipped naturally from his tongue. Elena prepared a traditional meal that evening, the familiar aromas filling Tahan's house. For the first time, they ate together at his table, rather than separately in house and barn. "Before we eat," Elena said, "we should give thanks in the old way." A silence fell. All eyes turned to Tahan, the eldest male and the property owner. The moment stretched uncomfortably until Thomas spoke. "Perhaps Elder Nara would honor us." The old woman smiled knowingly, but shook her head. "This is Tahan's home. It is his place." Tahan stared at his plate, conflicting emotions crossing his weathered face. Finally, he spoke softly in Apache, the blessing stumbling at first, then flowing more naturally as forgotten words returned. After the meal, as the children helped clean up, Lily asked innocently, "Why did you stop being Apache, Mr. Tahan?" A hush fell over the room. "Lily," Sarah admonished, "that's not appropriate." "It's a fair question," Tahan said quietly. "I never stopped being Apache. I just stopped being with Apaches." "Because you were angry?" the child persisted. Tahan looked at her directly. "Because I thought I was betrayed." "Were you?" she asked. "Before." Tahan could answer. Elena intervened. "That's a complicated story for another time, Lily. Later, alone on his porch, Tahan watched the stars emerge. Daniel approached cautiously, holding several newspaper clippings. "Found these in your workshop," he said. "About the land dispute back then." Tahan's expression hardened. "Put those back. You believe the tribal council sold out," Daniel said. "But that's not what happened." "You weren't even born," Tahan replied sharply. "You don't know what happened." "I know what the records show," Daniel countered. "And it's not what these newspapers claimed." Morning found Tahan and Daniel intense. Confrontation. The newspaper clippings lay spread across the kitchen table, yellowed headlines proclaiming, "Tribal Council approves resort development and sacred land sold for casino project." "You left because of these," Daniel said. "But they're lies." "I was there," Tahan countered. "I saw the council vote." Elena entered, immediately sensing the tension. "What's happening?" Daniel held up one of the clippings. "He still believes the council betrayed the tribe." Elena's face registered understanding. "Ah, the Silver Creek Project." "The Sacred Land Project," Tahan corrected bitterly. "The project that never happened," Elena replied. She sat down, facing Tahan directly. "The vote you saw was strategic too. Buy time while we built a legal case." Tahan's expression remained skeptical. "I saw the bulldozers move in." "And they were stopped 3 weeks later," Elena said, "after you'd already gone." Thomas entered, carrying a mug of coffee. "I was working for the development company back then," he admitted. "Security detail. I saw it from the inside." "You worked for them?" Tahan's voice hardened. "I needed the job," Thomas replied evenly, "until I saw how they operated. They deliberately spread misinformation within the tribe, created those misleading news stories. The council was divided on purpose," Elena explained, "made to look corrupt. But we never sold that land, Tahan. We fought for it and won." Tahan sat heavily, the foundation of his 20-year exile crumbling. "I heard." "You heard what they wanted you to hear," Elena said gently. "And then you left before learning the truth." Silence fell over the kitchen, broken only when Sarah entered with the children. "We need to prepare for Horizon's return," she said, sensing the need to change the subject. "They'll be back tomorrow." The practical concern provided welcome distraction. "We need to organize our documentation," Marcus suggested. "Prove the family's legal right to temporary refuge." "I have tribal council identification," Elena offered, "and the eviction notices showing the short timeline." Sarah spread several papers on the table, medical records proving the children's status as tribal members. As they worked, Elder Nara gathered the children in the main room, telling them a traditional story. Her voice carried to the kitchen. "Long ago, our people faced a great enemy. That caused us to scatter into the mountains. Each family thought they were alone, believing others had been destroyed. They struggled separately until a wise elder had a vision. He traveled from camp to camp, reuniting the divided tribe. Together, they drove away the enemy that none could face alone." Tahan listened, recognizing the teaching story from his own. Childhood dot by afternoon, their preparation was complete. Legal documents organized, property boundaries verified, tribal affiliations documented. "It's good," Tahan acknowledged, reviewing their work. "But Horizon Mining doesn't care about documentation. They care about power. Then we need our own power," Marcus said. "Community visibility, public pressure. Out here?" Tahan gestured to the isolated landscape beyond his windows. "The world is more connected now," Daniel explained. "One video, one news story can change everything." That evening, Tahan walked his property boundary alone, watching the sunset paint the distant mesas. The land was beginning to dry after the floods, though the main road remained impassable. He paused at a particular rise overlooking the eastern valley. This spot, with its commanding view, had always brought him peace. Now it brought questions. 20. Years of solitude built on a misunderstanding. 20 years of anger at a betrayal that never happened. The weight of that wasted time pressed down on him like a physical burden. Helena found him there as darkness fell. "This was always your favorite spot," she said. "You would come here to think even as a young man. You remember that?" "I remember. Everything about you, Tahan," she replied simply. "Even when you forgot yourself." They stood in silence, watching stars emerge. "I was wrong," Tahan finally said, the admission difficult after so many years of certainty. "Yes," Helena agreed. "But being wrong is not the worst thing. Refusing to see the truth once it's before you, that would be worse." "And now?" he asked. "What happens when Horizon returns tomorrow?" "Now," Helena said, "you have a choice. Continue standing alone, or stand with your people again." Dawn arrived with the comfortable rhythm of routine that had developed over the past days. Tahan emerged from his bedroom to find Elder Nara already tending the coffee pot, Ava nursing her baby in the rocking chair, and Daniel checking the weather. Radio, the house that had known only solitude for 20 years, now hummed with life. "Good Ada," little Lily greeted him in Apache as she passed with an armful of kindling. "Good Ada," Tahan replied, the traditional morning greeting feeling strangely natural on his tongue again. "I'm learning all the words," Lily announced proudly. "Grandma Elena says you know the most words of anybody." Tahan glanced at Elena, who was folding blankets nearby. "Your grandmother exaggerates. Can you teach me more?" Lily persisted. "I'm making a notebook of all the Apache words." Before Tahan could respond, Thomas and Marcus entered from their perimeter check. "Tracks on the North Ridge," Thomas reported. "Someone was watching the property yesterday." "Horizon Security," Marcus added. "They'll know our numbers and positions now." Tahan nodded grimly. "They'll return today, as promised." The family gathered for a council meeting after breakfast. Elena, as eldest woman, spoke first a traditional arrangement that Tahan honored. Without comment, "We need to decide how to respond when they come," she began. "They'll demand we leave with them." "Which is impossible," Sarah pointed out. "Even if we wanted to go, the main road is still washed out. They'll have found another route," Thomas warned. "One passable by their vehicles. We stand on our legal right to shelter here," Marcus said firmly. As they discussed strategy, young James approached Tan with a small wood carving. "I made this," he said, offering a roughly shaped wolf figure. "Daniel showed me how." Tahan examined the carving with surprising gentleness. "You're first?" The boy nodded earnestly. "Good work," Tahan said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "The spirit of the animal is there." James beamed at the approval, and something in Tahan's chest tightened unexpectedly. Later, they shared a community meal. The conversation flowed more easily now, with Tahan occasionally contributing rather than merely observing. Elena described the tribe's ongoing resistance to development projects over the decades Tahan had been absent. "We never stopped fighting," she explained. "Even when we appeared to concede, we were planning our next move. The younger generation has taken up the cause," Marcus added, nodding toward Daniel and Sarah. "They understand both the old ways and the new." "Is that why you left your job with the mining company?" Tahan asked Thomas directly. Thomas nodded. "I saw their tactics from the inside. The same playbook they used 20 years ago, divide. Community, spread misinformation, rush the process before opposition can organize." As evening approached, the radio crackled with a news report. "Horizon. Mining announced today the expansion of operations will bring economic benefits to Apache County, including employment opportunities for displaced residents." Tahan and Elena exchanged knowing glances. "The same promises," she said. "The same lies," he finished. After dinner, Tahan found himself drawn to where Elder Nara sat outside under the stars. She was performing a traditional blessing, her weathered hands moving through the familiar patterns. "May I join you?" he asked, the request surprising them both. She smiled and shifted slightly, making room. "You remember the words?" "I think so," he replied, settling beside her. Together, their voices blended in the ancient prayer hers, steady and practiced, his hesitant at first, then strengthening as forgotten phrases returned. When they finished, she studied him in the moonlight. "The circle is never broken, Tahan, only stretched until it finds its way back to wholeness." Inside, Lily showed Tahan her notebook of Apache words and phrases. The careful, childish handwriting recorded the language that was in danger of being lost. Without thinking, Tahan began adding words she had missed, explaining their meanings and proper pronunciation. "Why did you stop speaking Apache when you lived alone?" she asked innocently. Tahan considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, when we're hurt, we try to leave behind everything that reminds us of the pain, even the good things." "That's silly," Lily declared with a child's certainty. Tahan's mouth twitched. "Yes," he agreed simply. "It is." The 3-day deadline arrived, with the sun climbing over distant mesas. Tahan stood at his property gate, flanked by Marcus and Thomas. They didn't wait long before dust clouds appeared on the access road. 3 vehicles approached, the same black SUVs, but now accompanied by a different sheriff's cruiser and a sedan with corporate markings. They parked in a calculated formation that partially blocked the access road. Mike Lawson emerged first, his security uniform now accessorized with a more prominent sidearm. From the sedan stepped a woman in a crisp business suit, carrying a leather portfolio. The new deputy hung back, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Lone-Wolf," Lawson called with false cordiality. "We've returned as promised, with proper documentation." Tahan said nothing, simply watching as they approached the gate. The woman stepped forward. "Diane Miller, legal counsel for Horizon Mining. We have a court order authorizing the return of these individuals to the relocation center." She extended a document. Through the gate, Marcus took it, reviewing it carefully. "This order," Marcus noted, "specifically references displaced persons from Tribal Section 8 lands. It has no jurisdiction over guests on private property." Miller's professional smile tightened. "We have reason to believe these individuals are trespassing on your land, Mr. Lone-Wolf." "They're invited guests," Tahan stated flatly. "Apache tradition requires shelter for displaced kin." "Your property boundaries are in question," Lawson interjected. "Our surveys indicate possible encroachment on county-administered lands." Tahan smiled thinly. "I've been expecting that claim." He gestured to a line of weathered stones extending along the property edge. These markers were placed by the Apache Land Commission in 1892. They're recognized in the territorial agreements and subsequent federal treaties. Elder Nara had emerged from the house and now approached slowly. "I was present when those boundaries were reconfirmed in 1972, she said, her aged voice carrying surprising authority. The federal agent marked them himself. Miller appeared thrown by this unexpected historical witness. "Nevertheless, modern surveys cannot override treaty rights," Marcus finished firmly. The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am, those old treaties do have standing in county regulations. I checked." Miller shot the deputy an irritated glance before regaining her composure. "Mr. Lone-Wolf, Horizon Mining is prepared to discuss compensation if you're experiencing ... hardship ... by harboring these individuals. Are you attempting to bribe me on my own land?" Tahan asked mildly. The deputy visibly winced. "We'll return with updated documentation," Miller said, her tone hardening, "and a county surveyor to verify these ... historical claims." "Bring whoever you want," Tahan replied. The boundaries won't change. As the group retreated to their vehicles, Lawson lingered. This isn't over, old man. That land has value you don't even understand. I understand its value perfectly, Tahan countered. That's why you'll never have it. When the vehicles had disappeared in a cloud of dust, the family celebrated the small victory. Even Tahan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'll be back, Marcus cautioned. With more pressure. But we've bought time, Elena noted, and that deputy seemed uncomfortable with their tactics. Later that afternoon, Daniel's cell phone suddenly chirped to life. Signal's back, he exclaimed. Must be temporary, but I'm getting messages. He listened intently to a voicemail, his expression growing serious. That was Sam from the tribal office. Horizon is accelerating operations around the reservation. They're clearing land that wasn't even in the original plan. They're rushing before opposition can organize, Thomas observed. There's more, Daniel continued. Their environmental impact statement mentions securing water rights throughout the watershed region. Marcus and Tahan exchanged alarmed glances. Underground aquifer, Tahan said. It runs beneath this ranch. That explains their interest in your property, Elena realized. It's not just about finding us, they need this land for their water access. My deed specifically includes water. Rights, Tahan said. Grandfather clause from territorial days. Making your property extremely valuable, Marcus noted, and a significant obstacle to their plans. Tahan stared out the window toward the eastern valley. They've been watching me for years, he said slowly, waiting for the old man alone on, his ranch to die or sell out. Instead, they found the old man with his family returned, Elena said quietly. Tahan turned to her, something shifting in his eyes. Yes, he acknowledged, they did. As sunset painted the mesas in fiery orange, Tahan and Elena stood on the rise overlooking the eastern valley. For the first time, they spoke directly about the past that had divided them. When you left, Elena began, we lost more than our strongest voice. Tahan looked at her, the unspoken question in his eyes. We lost our heart, Tahan, she said simply. I lost mine. Night wrapped the ranch in a blanket of stars as Tahan and Elena continued their conversation on the eastern rise. There was a time, Tahan said carefully, when I thought you and I might ... build a life together, Elena finished. Yes, everyone expected it. When I believed the council had betrayed our sacred land, I couldn't understand how you stayed, Tahan admitted. I saw it as choosing them over our principles. Elena pulled a small journal from her pocket. I've documented everything since you left. Every meeting, every protest, every small victory and crushing defeat. She handed him the worn book. Tahan opened it, finding page after page of careful handwriting, detailing the tribe's continuing struggles. You kept fighting, he said quietly. We all did, she replied, while you fought your private war out here alone. The words held no accusation, just a simple truth that pierced Tahan more deeply than anger could have. I abandoned our people, he acknowledged, the admission painful. After decades of self-justification, you abandoned yourself, Tahan, Elena corrected gently. The man I knew would never have stopped fighting, never have hidden away while others carried on the battle. Memories surfaced of his younger self, passionate, committed, standing before county commissioners and corporate boards, speaking for Apache rights with unwavering conviction. That man is gone, Tahan said. Elena studied his face in the moonlight. I don't think so. I think he's been waiting all these years to return. As they walked back to the house, Thomas emerged from the shadows near the property boundary. Found these, he said grimly, holding up small electronic devices. Surveillance equipment placed along the fence line. Daniel examined them. Motion, sensors and cameras. They've been watching us. Lawson's people, Thomas confirmed. Military-grade equipment. The family gathered in the main room to discuss this development. They're preparing for something, Marcus warned. This level of surveillance suggests they're planning direct action. We need legal support, Sarah suggested. The tribal attorney should be notified. Elena nodded agreement. Catherine Redhorse has been handling our cases against Horizon. If we can reach her. Cell service is intermittent, Daniel said, but I can try sending a message when the signal returns. Lily and James had created a drawing of the family, which they proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Tahan noticed they had included him in the picture, standing beside Elena with the ranch house in the background. That's our family now, Lily explained when she caught him looking at it. You're in it. Something in Tahan's chest tightened at the child's simple inclusion. Later, alone in his bedroom, Tahan finally opened the cedar chest fully. He lifted out the medicine bundle, wrapped in red cloth, and untied it carefully. Inside lay sacred items he hadn't used in 20 years: eagle feather, ceremonial pipe, healing stones. He touched each one, feeling the connection to ancestors and traditions he had tried to leave behind. Without conscious decision, he began arranging the items in the traditional pattern of the blessing. Ceremony.morning brought a crackle of static from Daniel's cell phone, then a clear signal. He quickly connected with the tribal lawyer. Catherine can be here tomorrow, he announced after the call. She's bringing documentation that might help our position. Good, Marcus replied. Horizon won't wait much longer to make their move. Tahan had spent the early hours walking his property boundaries, mentally preparing for the coming confrontation. When he returned, he found Elena on the porch. I need to ask you something, she said without preamble. If we succeed here, if we stop Horizon from taking your land and force them to reconsider their expansion, what then? Tahan looked at her questioningly. Will you remain alone out here? She clarified. Or will you return to the community that needs you? Before Tahan could answer, Thomas approached urgently. Vehicles coming, he reported. Not Horizon this time. Looks like a news van. News? Elena was surprised. How would they know we're here? Someone talked to the press, Marcus suggested, joining them. Could be the deputy. Tahan watched the approaching vehicle with mixed emotions. For 20 years, he had valued his privacy above all else. Now, strangers with cameras were coming to his sanctuary. What do you want to do? Elena asked, sensing his conflict. Tahan considered the question carefully. 20 years ago, I hid from a fight I should have joined, he said. Finally, I won't make that mistake again. The news van stopped at the gate, where Thomas and Marcus stood guard. A young Navajo woman emerged, press credentials visible. Melissa Begay, Arizona Indigenous News Network, she called. We're reporting on the Horizon mining expansion and displacement of tribal members. Elena looked to Tahan, who gave a slight nod. Let them through, he said, but keep the children inside. The reporter approached with a cameraman following at a respectful distance. Thank you for speaking with us, she said. We've been covering the forced relocations, but this is the first time we've located any of the displaced families. How did you find us? Elena asked. Anonymous tip, Melissa replied. Someone mentioned that families had sought refuge with Tahan Lone-Wolf, a name that carries weight in tribal rights circles. Tahan looked surprised at this characterization. Is it true Horizon Mining has threatened this property as well? Melissa continued. They've made their intentions clear, Elena confirmed. This land represents an obstacle to their expansion plans. As the interview progressed, Tahan remained in the background, uncomfortable with the attention. The reporter documented the family's experience, the hasty eviction, the flooding that stranded them, Horizon's intimidation tactics. Would you be willing to speak on camera, Mr. Lone-Wolf? Melissa finally asked. Your history of advocacy for Apache rights gives your voice particular significance. I haven't been an advocate for a long time, Tahan replied. All the more reason your perspective matters now. She pressed gently. After a moment's hesitation, Tahan agreed to a brief statement. Standing before his ranch house, the mesas rising behind him, he spoke with unexpected eloquence about the pattern of displacement his people had endured for generations. This land holds our stories, he concluded. Without it, we lose more than property, we lose ourselves. After the news crew departed, Catherine Redhorse arrived in a mud-splattered SUV. The tribal attorney brought files, a satellite phone, and an unexpected revelation. I've been reviewing your original deed, she explained, spreading documents across Tahan's kitchen table. There's something significant here that Horizon's legal team has deliberately overlooked. The family gathered as Catherine pointed to specific language in the century-old document. This clause, she said, establishes that mineral and water rights remain with the property, in perpetuity as established by territorial covenant with the Apache Nation. This isn't just a standard deed. It's connected to the original tribal territory agreements. What does that mean exactly? Marcus asked. Catherine's expression was cautiously triumphant. It means Horizon can't access the aquifer without your permission, Diane. Not through legal means, anyway. That's why they've been pressuring me to sell for years, Tahan realized. Exactly, Catherine confirmed. And why they're so concerned about your harboring the displaced families. It's not about the people. It's about creating a legal pretext to challenge your property rights. If they can't get the water rights, Thomas reasoned, their entire expansion plan is compromised. More than compromised, Catherine said. There's no alternative water source with sufficient capacity for their operations. Without this aquifer, the project isn't viable. This revelation transformed their understanding of the conflict. Tahan's land wasn't just a minor obstacle, it was the key to stopping Horizon's entire expansion. We need to file for an emergency injunction, Catherine continued, based on the territorial water rights and the company's intimidation tactics. As she was explaining the legal strategy, Daniel spotted vehicles approaching from the North Ridge. That's not Horizon, he said, focusing binoculars. It's a news crew. Different network. The story is spreading, Helena realized. Thomas checked his phone. Signals back. The Arizona Indigenous Network piece is already online, getting shared widely. The satellite phone rang Catherine's colleague from the tribal legal office. Put it on speaker, she said after a brief conversation. I'm looking at Horizon's internal documents, said the voice over the phone. Someone leaked their environmental impact statement. They've been systematically misrepresenting water test results and projected usage. The actual numbers would never have passed regulatory approval. Who leaked it? Catherine asked. Anonymous source. But these documents are authentic. They have proper headers and signatures. As this news sank in, another vehicle appeared. One familiar. It's Deputy Reynolds, Marcus reported. Alone, no Horizon security. The deputy approached cautiously, hands visible. Mr. Lone-Wolf, he called. I need to speak with you. It's important. Tan met him at the gate. Reynolds glanced nervously over his shoulder before speaking. Horizon is mobilizing, he said quietly. They're coming tomorrow with everything they've got. County equipment, private security, the works. I can't be part of it anymore. Dawn broke with an unwelcome discovery. Daniel found the ranch's water tank emptied, pipes disconnected, and clear signs of tampering. Sabotage, Thomas confirmed, examining the cut lines and drained reservoir. Professional job, done overnight. The children need water, Sarah said, worriedly, and we need it for cooking, cleaning, ... Tahan's expression remained calm. There's a backup source. Come with me. He led Thomas and Daniel to a seemingly ordinary rock formation half a mile from the house. Moving one particular stone revealed a narrow passage descending into darkness. Apache hideaway, Tahan explained. There's an underground spring that my grandfather tapped generations ago. The hidden chamber contained a clean, flowing spring with collection basins carved from the rock itself. This saved my people during cavalry raids, Tahan said. Now it will help us again. As they filled containers with the sweet water, Thomas noticed something unusual on the ridge above them. Someone's been here, he said, indicating disturbed soil and cigarette butts. Recently, a thorough search revealed a hidden cache beneath a juniper tree, a waterproof bag containing surveillance photos of the property, maps with Tan's water lines marked, and detailed notes on the family's daily movements. They've been watching us more closely than we realized, Daniel said grimly. Among the items was a folded paper with handwritten notes. Water disruption scheduled for night of 15th. Access breach planned for 16th. Removal of all occupants by 17th regardless of resistance. This was left deliberately, Thomas realized. A warning. Or a threat, Daniel added. When they returned to the ranch, they found Catherine on her satellite phone, urgently discussing legal options. I can file the emergency injunction today, she announced after ending the call. But it won't be heard until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. Too late, Thomas said, showing her the timeline from the surveillance cache. Datalina studied the materials with growing concern. They're not just planning to remove us. They intend to assert control over the entire property. Tahan, Marcus said carefully, we need to consider bringing in the tribal council. This isn't just about our family anymore. It's about treaty rights that affect all Apache lands. Tan was silent for a long moment. The suggestion of involving the council, the very institution he had avoided for 20 years, clearly troubled him. Make the call, he finally said. This is bigger than my pride. While Elena coordinated with tribal representatives, Catherine prepared legal documents and a media statement. Public visibility is our best protection now, she explained. The more eyes on this situation, the harder it will be for Horizon to act with impunity. An unexpected delivery arrived at the gate, a manila envelope left by an unknown driver. Inside they found internal Horizon mining documents, emails discussing acquisition obstacles, territorial rights complications, and necessary persuasion techniques. Most damning were environmental reports showing alarming levels of contamination from existing operations deliberately concealed from regulators. Who sent these? Elena wondered. I have a guess, Tahan said, noting the county sheriff's department routing stamp on one of the papers. The delivery included a handwritten note. Deputy Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave for insubordination. I can no longer help directly, but others are watching. The implications were clear. Reynolds had risked his career to expose Horizon's corruption. As afternoon faded into evening, the family prepared for Horizon's expected arrival the next day. Thomas and Daniel organized watch rotations. Sarah ensured emergency medical supplies were ready. Marcus and Elena coordinated communications with tribal representatives. Throughout it all, Tahan moved with a calm purpose that seemed to steady everyone around him. The isolation that had defined him for decades was giving way to a remembered role, that of a leader. Tahan, Elena said quietly when they had a moment alone, the tribal chairman wants to speak with you directly. He's offering formal counsel, support, but he wants to hear from you first. Tahan took a deep breath. 20 years ago, I walked away believing I couldn't trust the council. Now I'm asking them to stand with me. With us, Elena corrected gently. You're not alone anymore. As night fell, another vehicle approached, this one carrying Tribal Chairman Jackson, Elder White, and Youth Representative Melanie. The Tribal Council had come in person, bringing not just support, but a formal olive branch to the man who had once been their strongest voice. I didn't expect this, Tahan admitted as they parked. Some journeys, Elena replied, take a long time to complete their circle. Tribal Chairman Jackson stepped from his vehicle carrying the ceremonial staff of office, a powerful symbol of Apache governance rarely taken from tribal headquarters. At 68, Jackson carried himself with the dignified bearing of a lifetime leader, his eyes sharp beneath silver hair. "Tahan Lone-Wolf," he said formally. "It has been too long." Tahan stood straight, uncertainty visible only in his eyes. "Chairman Jackson, we come as the counsel to the warrior who once stood with us," Jackson continued, following traditional protocol for approaching an estranged tribal member, Elder White, a woman in her 80s who had served on the council for 4 decades, extended her hands in the traditional greeting. "The circle seeks to be whole again." Melanie, barely 30 and representing the tribe's youth, completed the delegation. Her presence symbolized the future of Apache leadership inside Tahan's home, now crowded with council members and the family. Jackson placed the staff in the center of the table, an ancient gesture indicating that formal council business was being conducted. "We acknowledge past misunderstandings," Jackson began, "and recognize the warrior's right to walk his own path. But now the tribe faces a common enemy, and we come seeking unity." The formal language carried weight beyond the words themselves. This was not merely a strategic alliance, but an opportunity for reconciliation. "I left believing the worst," Tahan acknowledged. "I was wrong, and we failed to bring you home," Jackson replied. "We were wrong also." With this simple exchange, 20 years of division began to heal. The meeting quickly turned strategic. Catherine presented her legal approach, based on treaty rights and the documented evidence of Horizon's misconduct. The emergency injunction cites both territorial water rights and the company's intimidation tactics, she explained. But courts move slowly, and Horizon is moving now. "The media attention is growing," Melanie reported. "The initial story has been picked up by 3 national outlets. I've been coordinating our social media response." Thomas and Daniel outlined their security assessment. "They'll come in force," Thomas warned. "Multiple vehicles, private security, possibly county equipment. We expect them to claim legal authority they don't actually possess," Daniel added. "Their pattern is to act quickly and sort out the legalities later." Elder White listened intently before speaking. "This battle must be fought on multiple fronts: legal, public, and if necessary, on the land itself." Chairman Jackson nodded agreement. "We've mobilized tribal members. 30 are prepared to come tomorrow to stand in solidarity. And I've confirmed 3 news crews will be here," Melanie added. "Their presence will provide some protection." Throughout the strategy session, Tahan remained mostly silent, absorbing the coordinated response that had developed in his absence from tribal affairs. The organization, the integration of traditional and modern approaches, it was far more sophisticated than what he remembered from 20 years ago. "Tahan," Jackson said finally, "the council formally requests your return to your position as Elder Advisor on Land and Water Rights. The position has remained vacant since your departure." The room fell silent. This was no mere courtesy, but a genuine acknowledgement of Tahan's expertise and standing. "I left in anger," Tahan said slowly. "I abandoned my responsibilities to our people." "And now you have the chance to take them up again," Elder White responded. "The circle continues." Tahan looked around the room at Elena, whose faith in him had never wavered, at the family that had brought life back to his isolated existence, at the tribal leaders who had come in person to restore his place among them. "I accept," he said simply. Elder Nara, who had been quietly observing, now stepped forward with a small leather pouch. "Then it is time for you to be recognized properly." From the pouch, she withdrew sacred items for a traditional ceremony of restoration. As the others formed a circle, she prepared Tahan with sage and cedar, painting traditional symbols on his forehead and hands. The ceremony proceeded by firelight, ancient words spoken in the language of their ancestors. For the first time in 20 years, Tahan felt the weight of tribal responsibility settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a restored purpose. As dawn approached, their preparations were interrupted by Thomas's urgent return from perimeter watch. "Movement at the north boundary," he reported. "Someone's trying to breach the fence line." The security breach was repelled quickly, 2 men in unmarked clothing attempting to place surveillance equipment, retreating when confronted by Thomas and Daniel. But the message was clear. Horizon was testing their defenses before the main assault. Morning brought ominous news via Catherine's satellite phone. "They've obtained an emergency work order," she reported grimly. "Judge Harmon signed it. He's known to have connections with extraction companies." "What does this mean legally?" Chairman Jackson asked. "It gives them limited authority to access the property for assessment purposes," Catherine explained. "It's vaguely worded, but doesn't authorize removal of occupants or seizure of land. They'll use it as cover for whatever they want to do." Thomas predicted. As they discussed implications, vehicles began arriving, not Horizon's forces, but tribal members responding to the council's call. Men and women of all ages, some driving, hours from distant parts of the reservation. By mid-morning, over 30 Apache community members had gathered on Tahan's property. "Our people remember what it means to stand together," Elder White observed. Media presence increased as well. 3 news vans now parked near the gate, cameras documenting the growing assembly. A Phoenix television helicopter circled overhead, capturing aerial footage. "The visibility helps us," Melanie explained. "Horizon won't want their tactics broadcast live." In the house, Sarah and Elena prepared the children to move to the most secure location, the hidden spring chamber Tahan had revealed. "You'll be safe there," Sarah assured them. "Like our ancestors when they needed protection." Lily looked up at Tahan. "Will you come tell us when the bad people are gone?" "I promise," he replied, surprising himself with the gentle tone that came naturally with her. Elder Nara gathered the adults for a preparation ceremony. From her medicine bag, she produced a small pot of traditional red ochre. "Our warriors once painted themselves before facing enemies," she explained. "Not to frighten, but to invoke spiritual protection." She applied the sacred paint in traditional patterns, a vertical line down the forehead, horizontal marks across the cheekbones. As she reached Tahan, she paused. "The pattern for a war chief is different," she said. "Do you remember?" Tahan nodded slowly, accepting the ochre and drawing the distinctive markings of Apache leadership, 2 converging lines on the forehead, symbols of protection on each cheek. The transformation was remarkable. Standing with the traditional markings, Tahan embodied the warrior leader he had once been. The years of isolation seemed to fall away, revealing the man who had hidden beneath them. As noon approached, the tribal members gathered for a unity ceremony. Chairman Jackson raised the staff of office, then unexpectedly handed it to Tahan. "Today, you lead our defense," he said, "as is your right on your land." Tahan accepted the staff with steady hands. "We stand not just for this property, but for all Apache lands threatened by those who see only resources to exploit." His words, spoken with natural authority, resonated with the assembled community. Even those who had been children when he left recognized the return of a significant voice. Thomas interrupted with urgent news. Large convoy approaching from the East Access Road. At least 8 vehicles. From the highest point on the property, they watched Horizon's forces assemble. Heavy equipment bulldozers and excavators, accompanied by security vehicles, corporate, SUVs, and county trucks. At least 20 men in security uniforms established a staging area just beyond Tahan's boundary. "They're bringing everything," Daniel observed. "And everyone," Thomas added, focusing binoculars on the lead vehicle. "That's Hammond himself, the CEO. He wouldn't come personally unless this was critical to their plans." Catherine noted. As they watched, a judge's car arrived, followed by 2 sheriff's department vehicles. They're creating an impression of overwhelming legal authority, Catherine explained. Standard intimidation tactic. Tahan studied the assembly with a tactician's eye. They expect us to be frightened by their numbers and equipment, to believe resistance is futile. Are we ready? Elena asked quietly. Tahan looked around at the gathered Apache community elders to teenagers, all prepared to stand together. News cameras documenting every development. Legal counsel armed with documentation and injunctions. We are more ready than they expect, he replied. The helicopter camera captured a powerful image. Tahan Lone-Wolf, traditional paint marking him. As a war chief, standing with the staff of tribal office, surrounded by his people. Behind them, the ranch house where he had lived in isolation for 20 years. Before them, the corporate forces gathering to challenge not just a property line, but the sovereign rights of a people who had faced such challenges for centuries. They're moving, Thomas reported. The convoy had started engines, beginning its advance toward the ranch gate. Tahan raised the staff. It's time. The Horizon convoy halted at Tahan's gate, engines idling aggressively. CEO Richard Hammond emerged from the lead vehicle, a man in his 60s whose tailored suit seemed out of place in the desert landscape. Security Chief Lawson flanked him, along with the corporate lawyer Miller and several uniformed men. On Tahan's side of the gate stood an assembly that would have been unimaginable a week earlier. Tahan himself with the tribal staff and war chief. Markings flanked by Chairman Jackson and Elder White, with tribal members forming a human chain across the access point. News cameras captured every moment, their live feeds broadcasting nationwide. Hammond approached the gate, his confident smile not reaching his eyes. Mr. Lone-Wolf, quite the gathering you've assembled. Mr. Hammond, Tahan replied evenly. You bring many vehicles for a simple property assessment. We have a court order, Hammond stated, nodding to Miller, who held up the document. Signed by Judge Harmon, authorizing immediate access for preliminary work related to the Apache County Water Management Project. Catherine stepped forward. We have an emergency injunction filing, citing treaty water rights that supersede county jurisdiction. Filed but not granted, Miller countered. Our order is in effect now. Sheriff Patterson, a heavy-set man who had remained in his vehicle until now, approached reluctantly. Mr. Lone-Wolf, I'm obligated to enforce the court order. This property is established under the 1892 Territorial Agreement with specific water rights protections, Tahan stated. No county order can override federal treaty provisions. That's for the courts to decide, Hammond said dismissively. Meanwhile, we have authorization to proceed. Behind them, the heavy equipment operators started their engines, a clear threat. Chairman Jackson addressed the sheriff directly. You're aware that forcing entry onto treaty-protected land could violate federal law? The media is documenting everything. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the news cameras. We're prepared to arrest those who obstruct the lawful. Court order, Lawson interjected, gesturing to his security force. Private security has no arrest authority on tribal-connected land. Catherine countered as this legal confrontation unfolded. Tribal members linked arms, forming a human barrier across the access road. Elder Nara led several elders to the front line, their dignified presence creating a powerful image for the cameras. Hammond's composure slipped slightly. This theatrics won't stop progress. The expansion will proceed, whether you cooperate or not. Tell them what you really want, Hammond, Tahan challenged. Not just access for assessment. Tell them about the aquifer. Hammond's eyes narrowed. The water management aspects of our project benefit the entire county. Your project depletes the aquifer that feeds 3 tribal communities, Tahan responded. Your own environmental impact statement, the real one, not the version you submitted to regulators, shows that. News reporters pressed closer, Sensing a significant revelation, Hammond conferred briefly with his team, then abruptly changed. Tactics. Sheriff, execute the court order. Clear the access road. The sheriff hesitated, looking at the elders, the media, the growing crowd of tribal members. Mr. Hammond, I believe we should contact the judge for clarification, given the treaty. Rights claims. That's not your decision to make, Hammond snapped. From the helicopter overhead, cameras captured the confrontation, in its entirety the corporate forces, facing the unified Apache community. The elders standing their ground, Tahan at the center. With the symbols of tribal authority. Lawson, seeing the sheriff's reluctance, signaled his security team. Move in and secure the access point. As security personnel approached the gate, news cameras zoomed in on their aggressive posture, contrasted with the peaceful resistance of the tribal elders. If you touch these elders, Thomas warned, that footage goes national within minutes. Lawson hesitated, caught between Hammond's orders and the media exposure. Hammond, losing patience, ordered the equipment operators forward. Go around them if necessary. We have legal authorization. The bulldozer lurched toward the fence line adjacent to the gate, clearly intending to create a new access point. Stop them, Hammond ordered his security team, pointing toward the tribal members moving to block the machinery. As tensions escalated, a helicopter appeared from the east, not a news chopper, but a state police vehicle. It circled once, then landed on the flat area near the confrontation. This is getting out of hand, the sheriff muttered, stepping back. Hammond turned on him furiously. You work for the county, and the county wants this project. Remember that. Actually, Catherine interjected, holding up her satellite phone, he works for the people. And the state attorney general's office is very interested in the documentation. We've provided them about Horizon's environmental violations. The state police captain emerged from the helicopter, approaching with measured steps. The tribal members maintained their human chain, while Horizon security forces paused, uncertain. Captain Rivera, Arizona State Police, the officer announced. We've received reports of a potential public safety incident. We're executing a legal court order, Hammond stated firmly. Local matter, not state jurisdiction. When it involves potential civil rights violations and disputed treaty lands, it becomes a state concern, Rivera countered. He surveyed the scene elders in the front line, heavy equipment poised to breach property boundaries, armed security personnel in confrontational stances. My orders are to maintain peace while legal questions are resolved, he continued. No equipment moves, no forced entry to the property. Hammond's face flushed with anger. This project has county approval. We have investors waiting, timelines to meet, and we have laws to follow, Rivera replied calmly. As this exchange unfolded, Tahan noticed movement at the eastern boundary. Several security personnel were attempting a flanking maneuver, circling toward a less visible access point. Thomas, Tahan said quietly, east fence line. Thomas nodded, silently gathering Daniel and several younger tribal members. They moved swiftly to intercept the security team trying to breach the perimeter. Hammond, seeing his covert team spotted, abandoned pretense. This delay is costing millions. If you people cared about economic development, we care about our water. Tan interrupted, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. We care about land that has sustained Apache people for centuries. Your economic development drains the aquifer, contaminates the soil, and leaves nothing for future generations. The media cameras swung toward him, capturing his words. For 20 years, I hid from this fight, Tahan continued, addressing not just Hammond, but the wider audience. Through the news cameras, I believed our cause was lost. But these people, he gestured to the tribal members standing firm, never stopped defending what is sacred. Today I stand with them again, as I should have all along. His impromptu speech, delivered with the natural authority of a leader who had found his voice again, resonated beyond the immediate confrontation. The cameras captured the stark contrast corporate forces with machinery and weapons, facing elders and community members armed only with unity and resolve. Hammond, seeing the narrative slipping from his control, made a desperate decision. Proceed. With the assessment, he ordered his equipment operators. The court order authorizes access. State police order supersedes until jurisdictional questions are resolved. Captain Rivera countered. Hammond turned to the sheriff. Patterson, do your job. Clear these trespassers. The sheriff looked from Hammond to the tribal elders, then to the state police captain. His choice was clear in his expression before he spoke. My deputies will stand down pending legal clarification. As Hammond's face contorted with fury, a bulldozer suddenly roared to life. Its operator, apparently acting on earlier orders, began advancing toward the property line where sacred sites were marked with traditional symbols. Tahan moved with surprising speed for his age, placing himself directly in the machine's path. The tribal staff held high. He stood his ground as the bulldozer approached. Stop that man! Captain Rivera shouted, but it was Elena who reached the operator first, slapping the emergency cutoff switch on the bulldozer's exterior. The engine died abruptly, leaving a tense silence broken only by the whir of news cameras. Hammond strode toward Tahan, decades of restrained contempt finally visible. You've been a thorn in my side since Silver Creek, he snarled, close enough now that only those nearby could hear. I thought we'd finally broken your influence then. Tahan's eyes widened with sudden understanding. It was you behind the misinformation campaign, the false reports about the tribal council. Business strategy, Hammond replied coldly. Divide and conquer. It worked too. You ran away and hid for 20 years while we prepared for the real prize, this aquifer. Their confrontation was interrupted by a commotion from the state police vehicle. An officer approached Captain Rivera, handing him a document. Richard Hammond, Rivera announced. I have a cease and desist order from the State Environmental Protection Division citing violations of groundwater protection statutes. All horizon mining operations in this watershed are suspended pending investigation. The assembled tribal members erupted in cheers while Hammond stood stunned. Furthermore, Rivera continued, I'm instructed to escort Horizon personnel from this property immediately. Hammond's carefully constructed facade crumbled. This isn't over, he threatened Tahan. There are other judges, other approvals. Perhaps, Tahan acknowledged. But this time, you'll face a united people. And we'll be watching.